Hello again everybody and welcome to the 939th meeting of the Shakespeare Club of Stratford-upon-Avon. April's always a special month here as it's Shakespeare's birthday, and the Shakespeare Club organised the very first Shakespeare celebrations in the 1820s. It no longer takes such an active role, but is still involved. For the second year running, the actual celebrations have had to be cancelled, but we've been invited to take part in the town's virtual celebrations, and our chairman, Susan Brock, will lay our traditional wreath at the grave in Holy Trinity Church on behalf of the club. This event is being pre-recorded and you will be able to watch the whole thing on the 23rd and 24th of April. But we thought we'd like to create a more personal view of the celebrations relating to the club, its members and friends. So I've put together a presentation about the history of the celebrations and the club's involvement in them. And I've interweaved personal memories, impressions and photographs contributed by our members. Meanwhile, we hope that next year Stratford will be hosting an international event, making it again the focus of Shakespeare attention worldwide. There is still, though, a very local flavour to the celebrations. The club began when a group of local people decided to do something to celebrate their Shakespeare, and it remains completely independent, made up of people from the town and nearby villages. During the past year, while we've been forced to go virtual, we've been delighted to add many new names, some from abroad, to our mailing list. More information about the club is on the website. So here we go. I hope you enjoy it.
William Shakespeare was born in Stratford-upon-Avon in 1564, and his birthday is traditionally celebrated on the 23rd of April, a few days before he was baptised in Holy Trinity Church. The date coincides with the annual festivals for St George, the patron saint of England. Shakespeare died on 23rd of April 1616, and his grave is in the chancel of the church, where a carved monumental bust is positioned on the wall. We're lucky in Stratford to have so many buildings that Shakespeare knew still standing in the town, and as the celebrations take place around the town, most of them feature in today's birthday celebrations. Many of you will be familiar with the celebrations as they have been for about 100 years. Flags of many nations and organisations are flown to symbolise Shakespeare's worldwide influence. A parade meanders through town, often including the birthplace, always ending up at the church. By tradition, the students of Shakespeare's school lead this parade. Flowers are carried, including floral wreaths as well as simple posies, and all are deposited at the church, where they decorate the chancel. A variety of other entertainments take place, including the playing of military bands, folk dancing and Morris dancing. More recently, other events have also taken place. A good meal has been part of the event since the earliest days, and the birthday luncheon is marked by speeches and toasts, most notably to the immortal memory of William Shakespeare. But for many years after his death, Shakespeare's life was not particularly celebrated in his town. Visitors did come and went to places associated with him. The birthplace is shown on a map of the town in 1759, and his house at New Place was so popular that the owner first of all chopped down the mulberry tree in the garden that Shakespeare was said to have planted, and then demolished the house itself. The first proper celebration of Shakespeare was David Garrick's Jubilee in 1769. Garrick was the most famous actor of his day and had made his name playing Shakespeare's leading men, including Romeo, Hamlet and Richard III. His Jubilee celebrated the life of the man. It took place in September and famously did not include any of his plays, but it still set the tone. The visitors to the Jubilee were almost all wealthy people and gentry from London, and musicians and even waiters were brought in. Local people were scarcely involved, except that they provided accommodation, food and drink for those coming. The souvenir trade, however, was in full swing. Commemorative medals in a variety of metals were struck at nearby Birmingham, and the rainbow ribbon from which they hung was made at Coventry. Some of these medals, almost the only existing souvenirs, are still in the town. One belongs to a member of the Shakespeare Club committee, Eileen Geldard, whose husband bought it for her at an auction as a gift, and another is in the possession of a member of an old Stratford family, Roger Bliss. I met him at the birthday luncheon several years ago, and his medal has been in his family's possession for generations, perhaps even since the Jubilee itself. Garrick originally intended there to be a procession through town of people dressed as Shakespeare's characters, but torrential rain put paid to it. This was to be the most popular element of the Jubilee. After the formation of the Shakespeare Club, they decided to stage it themselves. So in 1827, this became the first outdoor parade of Shakespeare's characters anywhere in the world, and it was immensely popular, drawing thousands to the town. The procession was repeated in 1830 as shown here. The Union Jack and Royal Standard fly outside the birthplace, where the bust of Shakespeare is crowned with a laurel wreath, and characters from the plays stand around as crowds watch. But these expensive, complicated processions could not be maintained, and in the 1830s the club changed its aim towards the more serious objectives of preserving the church bust and buildings associated with Shakespeare. Celebrations focused on dinner at the town hall, hosted by the mayor, and the dinners, instead of being for locals, became events at which wealthy donors and sponsors were first wooed and then congratulated after the purchase of the birthplace in 1847. Birthday celebrations made a comeback in 1864 with the erection of a magnificent wooden auditorium which housed performances of Shakespeare, concerts and a magnificent banquet. One member, Nick Fogg, has a piece of memorabilia associated with this. He says, "I am the proud possessor of a magnificent bust, it could only be of the bard, created by the sculptor Felix Martin for the 1864 tercentenary celebrations. I used to think that it had once breathed the wholesome air of Stratford, until I discovered that it had been produced under the special sanction of the National Shakespeare and Stratford-upon-Avon tercentenary committees by retailers in London's Regent's Park." In 1877, coinciding with the foundation of the Shakespeare Memorial Theatre, rustic sports such as races, jumping in sacks and climbing the greasy pole were aimed at entertaining the locals. The celebrations took a different turn from 1879 when the Shakespeare Memorial Theatre opened. Now the focus of the day was a performance, and there was much less novelty in seeing people in costume. Instead, the celebrations during the day became a kind of act of remembrance, with elements we recognise today being added. Easter Sunday fell on the 23rd of April in 1893, and the mayor arranged for the town to be decorated with flags, streamers and laurel festoons, and led by the town band, a parade of representatives of the local government and Shakespeare organisations walked to the church for a special service in honour of the poet's birthday. The day before, the masters and pupils of Kes carried a magnificent floral wreath to the church, where it was received by the vicar, who placed it on Shakespeare's grave. These two events were so successful that they combined, and a new tradition was created. By 1898, the crowd could not all fit into the church, and in 1904 the Shakespeare Club formalised the event as a procession, inviting townspeople to take part and bring flowers. This is how the tradition began, that the pupils of King Edward's School, now both girls as well as boys, lead the procession down to the church. And so the celebrations carried on. In 1907, the cradle-to-grave route was first used, beginning from the birthplace rather than the town hall. Flagpoles were put up in Bridge Street for the first time in 1908, encouraging international participation. A letter from organisers said, "It must not be forgotten that we have the eye of the whole world upon this town, and it is for us all to prove we are willing and able to maintain the world's appreciation." Most of the familiar elements were now in place. It was only a step to invite official representatives in the shape of ambassadors to come to Stratford, attired where possible in national dress, carrying elaborate wreaths, to take part in the procession. Shakespeare worship probably reached its peak in 1964 with the Quater Centenary, 400 years since Shakespeare was born. A new Shakespeare Centre was opened in Henley Street. An exhibition was staged on the ground opposite the theatre. Several of our members remember 1964, including particularly the exhibition. Member Nick Fogg remembers that his mother was the box office manageress for the exhibition, which took place in this pavilion, and says he saw quite a lot of it and wonders what happened to all the objects that are exhibited there. He describes it as magnificent and splendid. Daphne Ingram was working at the Shakespeare Institute in 1964 and well remembers going to the exhibition and very much enjoying it, being busy with lots of visitors at the Shakespeare Institute, of course. Ruth Oars remembers that she hadn't long come to Stratford to work as a nurse at the hospital and has vivid memories of the exhibition with its Tudor-inspired but very 1960s style. She was lucky enough to be given tickets to the theatre, but remembers more about the building and her charming companion than the play. The first time I attended the birthday celebrations was in 1966. The snap taken by my brother shows my father, me, my mother and grandmother striding down Old Town, touching bunches of daffodils. Like many people, we tagged along at the end of the official procession. My father, who had been to Kes as a boy, instilled in me that this was an official occasion that anybody could join in with, that it was, like Shakespeare, for everybody. One of our committee members remembers the parade in 2018 for a different reason. The Shakespeare children's books that she writes had their own flagpole for the very first time, a sign they'd really arrived. There's a very strong connection between the birthday celebrations and school children. They always participate. One of our members remembers always being in the procession every year while he was at Broad Street's primary school. In 2018 to 2019, the Shakespeare Club's president was theatre director Emma Rice. She had already endeared herself to members by giving an outstanding talk, and she gamely turned up to walk in the procession with members. It was the coldest, windiest birthday for many years, and she and Susan Brock struggled up Bridge Street towards the club's flagpole as the freezing wind blasted them and the banner they were carrying. Helen Hargis took these lovely photos. There have been several attempts to get people to dress up. Here are townspeople as Othello, Henry IV, Isabella, and myself as Portia. On this occasion, I stewarded Fabia Drake. The actress had been both the first Rosalind and the first Lady Macbeth in the 1932 theatre. She couldn't manage the full walk, so while the rest of the procession headed up Henley Street to visit the birthplace, we strolled to the Shakespeare Hotel for coffee. While we waited for the rest of the procession to catch us up, she regaled me with stories from the 1930s about Peggy Ashcroft and her affair with the great theatre director Komisarjevsky, a real grand old lady of the British theatre. Susan Brock, working at the Shakespeare Institute, often introduced visitors, students, actors and diplomats to the traditional and sometimes esoteric events, the procession from the birthplace to the Holy Trinity Church, cradle to grave, the carrying of flowers, the unfurling of flags, the Morris men, always a puzzle, and the birthday lunch. But anyone with an international connection has always been welcome to steward the representative of that country. And in 2004, when she was ex officio deputy director of the birthday celebrations, she walked in the procession with 2 diplomats from the Chinese embassy. They were accompanied by Susan's niece, Lizzie, here in the pink jacket, marking her 7th birthday the day after the celebrations. "We all had a lovely time," says Susan. And here's another group from China, a theatre group, visiting the birthday celebrations a few years ago. International guests have always been very welcome at the birthday celebrations, and local people would act as stewards. But often, if you offered to steward, you ended up with someone from a country you might know nothing about. Richard Morris regularly stewarded, and one year ended up with the High Commissioner from Botswana. I knew nothing about the country, but as it happened, I'd watched a programme on the television just before on the Okavango swamp in Botswana. I mentioned this to the High Commissioner, and it was as if I'd turned a tap full on, as I'd clearly hit on his favourite subject. I didn't need to worry about making conversation, and by the end of the walk, we were on such friendly terms he invited me and my wife for drinks that evening at the hotel where he was staying. Music's been a really important part of the celebrations right back to Garrick's time, but nowadays tends to be brass bands with smaller celebrations during the day. One of our members, Janet Polson, has particularly special members of the 2016 weekend, when in addition to the usual activities, there was a huge amount of Shakespeare-related music going on at the other place. Radio 3 took over the other place and broadcast many programmes from there, all highlighting music inspired by Shakespeare, and some of which also featured readings. The takeover started on Friday afternoon, and I spent the rest of that day and all of the next 2 dashing between their broadcasts and other birthday-related engagements, including a wonderful concert of Shakespeare odes at Holy Trinity Church, which memorably featured Sam West in the guise of David Garrick. There's a direct link between one tune that's still played by the band and the very first celebrations. The Warwickshire Lad, now the Royal Warwickshire Regiment's Quick March, was composed by Charles Dibdin for Garrick's Jubilee in 1769. Dancing, too, is a regular part of the birthday celebrations activities. Folk dancing by local school children down on the Bancroft is fondly remembered by one of our local members, and Morris dancing has featured for many years too. Inside the church, the organ is playing as the crowd come through, and the procession slowly makes its way to the chancel, where the flowers are handed over. Respects are paid to Mr. Shakespeare before exiting into the fresh air by the little door just on the right. In recent years, the Pragnell Prize for Outstanding Shakespeare Achievement has been awarded at the luncheon. Winners have included Judi Dench, Kenneth Branagh, critic Michael Billington, director Trevor Nunn, and here Jane Lapotaire and Anthony Sher. Celebrities, including actors such as Donald Sinden and historian Michael Wood, who's incidentally one of our past presidents, often attend the luncheon, sometimes as Master of Ceremonies. Nicholas Fogg tells a story about Peggy Ashcroft, an actress famous for her mellifluous voice. One of my memories of the birthday luncheon is of what must have been the briefest lines to receive a standing ovation on record. Dame Peggy merely uttered the words, "My lords, ladies and gentlemen," in her own mellifluous tones, and the place erupted. It brought the house down within seconds. Many venues have been used for the birthday luncheon. The town hall until it became too small, marquees on the garden near the church, and most recently the ballroom at the Clown Plaza Hotel, where the club booked several tables for members. These are just some of the novelties that have been included in the birthday celebrations over the past 10 years. I really enjoyed seeing people wearing the Shakespeare masks and the New Orleans jazz band who played their way through the town. Here are some more of the novelties that we've seen over the last 10 years. They all add to the entertainment and encourage local participation. With travel and socialising still not fully open, we can only echo Feste's song in Twelfth Night. What's to come is still unsure. But what is certain is that Stratford Shakespeare celebrations will continue to go on long into the future.
I'd like to thank everybody who's taken part in the session today. It's been great fun hearing about people's stories, and I haven't been able to include all the details. One of our members commented, "All my memories of past celebrations are good. Why do I always remember the sun shining?" Lots of us have memories of the birthday celebrations, but there can't be many people for whom they've been life-changing. This is the case though for one member, and I'm going to end this session with Jenny Wybrow's story. 1972, 4 sixth formers from an unusual girls' boarding school in the Chiltern, RSC crazy since Brooks' Dream, Peter Brooks' production of A Midsummer Night's Dream. The Aldwych, the RSC's London theatre, was like a Saturday home, with a headmistress who would put us on the Great Missenden train to Marylebone to attend a matinee and collect us from the station in the evening. This was bigger, booked rooms at the Red Horse for an April weekend. The eldest of the 4 drove us on our own to Stratford for the start of Trevor Nunn's Romans season. This was a season of Shakespeare's 4 plays set in classical Rome, done by the RSC. On arrival, the sun was shining, the sky was blue, daffodils blowing, the flagpoles were up, and a sense of anticipation was palpable. We didn't know the significance of the date, and then discovered the birthday celebrations. Joining the procession to Holy Trinity, and the seed of my future was sown. What a welcome to the town. We wasted away the day, tea at the Cobweb, sitting in the theatre gardens, chatting to anyone who passed, including actors we'd seen at the Aldwych. Then in the evening, the magic of Chris Morley's new hydraulic stage and Ian Hogg's Coriolanus. And yes, I returned. 2 of us got a summer job living in at the Falcon. The next year I started part-time front of house at the theatre and temping through the departments through the summer. Brierley, Flanagan, Daniels, Nunn, Goodbody and all. These were the administrative staff and directors of the theatre. By 1975, I was secretary to Terry Hans, one of the most important directors, Happiness, and eventually married one of those actors we'd chatted with. 23rd of April, important date. Important date indeed. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next time.